In a major development that signals growing tension between Canada and the United States, the Canadian federal government has made a bold move by halting all rebate payments to Tesla and banning the company from participating in any future subsidy programs. This shift in policy, announced by Transport Minister Chrystia Freeland, didn't come out of nowhere. It's part of a broader strategy to protect Canadian interests, amid what Canada sees as increasingly aggressive tariff threats from the Trump administration. Freeland, who's also seeking re-election in University Rosedale, laid out her reasoning clearly. She wants every single rebate claim from Tesla thoroughly reviewed before any money changes hands. Speaking to Global News, Freeland stated, "Upon assuming my role as transport minister, I instructed my department to stop all payments, while ensuring that claims are valid and meet eligibility criteria." She added that payments would not resume until there is confidence in the legitimacy of the claims submitted by Tesla. This crackdown was sparked by a staggering surge in rebate applications that came in all at once. According to the Toronto Star, Tesla submitted 8,753 rebate claims in just 72 hours back in January. That's nearly 3,000 claims, a extraordinary volume that coincided with the looming expiration of Canada's federal rebate program. The timing and volume of those claims raised red flags across government departments. Freeland's response wasn't just to hit pause. She also took steps to rewrite the rules of the game, changing eligibility criteria for Canada's zero-emission vehicles program to specifically exclude Tesla from receiving any more financial incentives. It was a significant message. Canada's EV subsidy programs are for companies that play by the rules, and that means not trying to flood the system just before a policy window closes. This move also lines up with Freeland's previous public frustrations over American economic policies. During her leadership campaign, she openly supported imposing a 100% tariff on Tesla vehicles due to Elon Musk's close ties with the Trump administration. That proposal wasn't just economic, it was political. It suggested a larger strategy push back hard against U.S. tariffs and send a message that Canada isn't going to sit back. While foreign companies benefit from subsidies without reciprocity, Tesla's surge in rebate claims now looks like more than just a business maneuver. It's been interpreted by some as an attempt to take advantage of Canadian taxpayers before the window closed. But Freeland's decisive reaction, freezing payments and proposing policy reforms, reflects how serious the government is about making sure the rebate program isn't abused. This moment isn't just about electric cars. It's about trade policy, political leverage, and national interests. Canada, under increasing pressure from U.S. tariffs, is beginning to rethink how it handles foreign companies that might not align with its values or economic goals. Tesla just happens to be the most high-profile case right now, and with Musk's connections to Trump, the situation has turned into a flashpoint for broader political tensions. For Canadian consumers, this might be frustrating. Many had hoped to take advantage of rebates when buying a Tesla. But for the government, it's about setting a standard. Until Tesla can prove that its claims are clean and its conduct meets the new criteria, it's off the list. And as the rebate freeze holds, this fight between Tesla and Ottawa is quickly becoming a symbol of something much bigger: how Canada wants to define its economic sovereignty in the face of international pressure. The situation surrounding Tesla's rebate claims has drawn attention from various political quarters, with multiple parties now weighing in on the implications of Canada's decision to halt payments. On one side, the federal NDP New Democratic Party has voiced its support for a much more aggressive stance against Tesla, echoing Freeland's earlier comments about imposing a 100% tariff on the electric vehicle manufacturer. The NDP, long vocal about protectionist policies in trade, is increasingly aligning itself with a rising tide of Canadian political sentiment that calls for more direct action against foreign influence in domestic markets. In particular, they argue that Tesla, a company with strong connections to the Trump administration, should not be allowed to benefit from Canadian subsidies, while the U.S. maintains tariffs on Canadian products. In addition to the NDP's position, conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has offered a nuanced take on the situation. Poilievre has previously expressed admiration for Elon Musk's business acumen and the potential economic benefits of bringing Tesla's factories to Canada. Despite his respect for Musk, Poilievre distanced the Conservative Party from the controversy surrounding the rebate program, suggesting that the whole debacle stems from decisions made by the current Liberal government. By framing the issue as a product of the Liberal administration's own policies, Poilievre has sought to minimize Conservative involvement in the debate, though his party has yet to take a firm stance on tariffs, against Tesla vehicles specifically. Poilievre's rhetoric, while avoiding direct conflict with Musk, emphasizes the importance of job creation for Canadians. He argues that Canada's focus should be on creating opportunities for Canadian workers, particularly through the development of high-tech industries like electric vehicles. His approach contrasts sharply with the Liberal government's handling of the situation, with some critics accusing Freeland of being overly cautious and not prioritizing Canadian jobs and economic growth as aggressively as she could. Meanwhile, the public reaction to Tesla's involvement in the rebate program has been increasingly negative. Protests against the company have sprung up across various provinces, with many Canadians voicing frustration over Musk's ties to the U.S. government and his controversial public stances on a range of issues. Tesla dealerships in Canada are reportedly facing unrest, as some customers have expressed dissatisfaction with the company's perceived influence on Canadian policy. This public dissatisfaction reflects a broader conversation in Canada about the role of foreign corporations operating in the country and their responsibilities toward Canadian values. The political dynamics surrounding Tesla are not limited to federal politics. Provincial governments are also making moves to protect their own interests. For example, both Nova Scotia and Manitoba have announced that Tesla vehicles will no longer be eligible for their provincial electric vehicle rebate programs. These decisions signal a strong stance against a company perceived to be undermining local economic priorities. In British Columbia, Tesla products have been excluded from eligibility for electric vehicle charger rebate programs for single-family homes, a move that reflects growing concerns about the company's influence. At the provincial level, the debate has centered on protecting local industries and ensuring that Canadian economic interests are not subordinated to the interests of foreign corporations. These actions by provinces like Nova Scotia, Manitoba, and British Columbia show that there is a growing consensus in Canada about the need for stronger protections against foreign corporate overreach. Whether it's the federal government freezing rebate payments or provinces taking action against Tesla's participation in local rebate programs, the message is clear. Canada is ready to take a tougher stance in its trade and economic relationships. In Ontario, Premier Doug Ford made headlines when he decided to terminate a $100 million contract with Musk's internet service provider Starlink. Ford's decision has been framed as an example of the province's resolve to distance itself from foreign corporations that do not align with Canadian values. The Premier's declaration that the contract would remain off the table, even if U.S. tariffs were lifted, sends a clear message. Ontario is committed to ensuring that the province's economic interests are protected, regardless of external pressure. Ford's actions add another layer of complexity to the already fraught relationship between Canada and the U.S. when it comes to economic policy, as the political dynamics surrounding Tesla and the broader issues of trade and foreign influence continue to unfold. The spotlight has also shifted to the implications of these decisions for the Canadian economy, and more specifically, for Alberta. Premier Danielle Smith, in particular, has found herself at the center of a growing debate about how to balance Alberta's economic interests with the larger, more contentious issues of international trade. Smith's leadership, particularly as it relates to her dealings with the U.S., is under heavy scrutiny. Her upcoming trip to Florida, where she will be speaking alongside controversial figures like conservative media personality Ben Shapiro, highlights the intersection of local and international politics. Smith's actions are generating intense debates not only about Alberta's political direction, but also about Canada's larger role on the global stage. Her decision to engage with American political figures known for divisive views has raised questions about how far Alberta and Canada, more broadly, is willing to go in, engaging with foreign entities that do not always align with Canadian values. Critics of Smith argue that her willingness to associate with figures like Shapiro undermines Alberta's reputation and its standing in the international community. The concern is that, by aligning with individuals whose views many consider controversial or offensive, Smith could be risking Alberta's future economic and political interests, particularly in the context of Canada's relationship with the U.S. For Smith, however, this is not just about a political appearance, it's a strategic move to raise Alberta's profile. In the broader debate about trade and economic development, Smith's administration is focused on securing Alberta's economic interests in the face of significant challenges, particularly in relation to the province's oil and gas sector. Alberta's dependence on the energy sector has long been a contentious issue in Canadian politics, especially as the global conversation around climate change intensifies. Smith's engagement with American figures who represent the interests of the conservative right might be seen as a way to create stronger ties between Alberta's energy interests and U.S. business sectors. By engaging with influential figures, Smith is positioning herself as a defender of Alberta's economic priorities, which include advocating for more resource development and less government intervention. Smith's strategy, however, raises a crucial question. What is the long-term cost of aligning Alberta with figures who may have views at odds with the broader Canadian identity? Critics argue that by associating with figures like Shapiro, Smith risks alienating many Canadians who see the country's values as rooted in inclusivity, equality, and respect for all people. In this highly polarized political environment, it's clear that the repercussions of her actions will not be limited to her standing in Alberta alone. Her decisions have the potential to shape the entire political landscape of Canada, and they are already drawing sharp lines between those who support her approach and those who oppose it. The political fallout from Smith's engagement with American figures also extends to how Canadians view their provincial leaders and their role in the broader political arena. Alberta, as a key province within the Canadian Federation, has always been a stronghold of resource development and economic growth. However, the province's relationship with the federal government and its position on global trade and climate change have been increasingly contentious. Smith's approach to international relations is seen by some as an opportunity to open new economic avenues for Alberta, particularly in the context of trade with the U.S. and beyond. However, for others, her actions signal a dangerous shift away from the values that have long defined Canada's national identity. As the public debate intensifies, Smith will be forced to navigate these complex dynamics, balancing Alberta's economic interests with the broader responsibility to represent Canadian values. On the international stage, her actions will have far-reaching implications for her leadership and for Alberta's future. How she engages with U.S. political figures and how she manages Alberta's relationship with the rest of Canada will be critical to determining the trajectory of her administration. In the coming months, Smith's approach to international relations will be put to the test. Her handling of the Tesla controversy, the ongoing discussions about tariffs, and her engagement with figures like Shapiro will all play a pivotal role in shaping public opinion. For Alberta and for Canada as a whole, these decisions represent a crucial moment in the country's political evolution. The pressure is on Smith to demonstrate that her leadership can unite the province while safeguarding its interests in an increasingly globalized world. As Premier Danielle Smith's political strategy becomes more entrenched, the ripple effects of her controversial engagement with U.S. figures like Ben Shapiro are being felt throughout Canada. The criticisms she is facing aren't limited to Alberta alone. Across the country, Canadians are debating the role of provincial leaders in international diplomacy, particularly when it comes to balancing domestic interests with foreign relationships. For Smith, her actions are part of a broader strategy, to ensure that Alberta's voice is heard on the global stage, especially in matters that directly impact its economic well-being. The question, however, is whether this strategy will ultimately strengthen Alberta's position or backfire. By alienating key allies both at home and abroad, Smith's decision to engage with American figures known for their extreme viewpoints raises uncomfortable questions about the kind of leadership that is needed in Canada's provinces. Critics argue that aligning with figures who espouse controversial or divisive rhetoric can damage Alberta's reputation and undermine Canada's commitment to inclusivity, diversity, and respect for human rights. By choosing to stand alongside someone like Shapiro, Smith risks being seen as compromising on the values that are widely recognized as part of Canada's national identity. This situation encapsulates the delicate balancing act that Smith, and by extension Alberta, must perform as they navigate complex international relationships. On the other hand, Smith and her supporters argue that her outreach to influential American figures is a pragmatic response to the geopolitical realities of the modern world. With Alberta's economy heavily reliant on the oil and gas industry, and with tensions in trade policy escalating, Smith sees value in cultivating closer ties with conservative U.S. figures who share her economic outlook. By engaging with these figures, Smith hopes to align Alberta with a pro-business agenda that can help strengthen its economic position, both within Canada and in the global market. For Smith, this is not about abandoning Canadian values, it's about ensuring that Alberta's economic priorities are understood and supported on the international stage. However, the response from within Alberta and across the country is far from unanimous. While some Albertans applaud Smith's bold stance, others are deeply uncomfortable with the optics of her engagement with figures who are widely regarded as controversial. The backlash is palpable in the growing criticisms from opposition parties, who accuse Smith of undermining Canada's core values. These critics argue that Alberta's long-term prosperity is tied to the country's ability to maintain strong, positive relationships with its international partners, particularly those in Europe and the U.S., aligning with figures who are divisive could alienate potential allies and undermine Alberta's standing in broader trade discussions. The debate surrounding Smith's political strategy is also tied to the growing discontent in the Canadian public about the role of foreign corporations, especially those with ties to the U.S. The issues surrounding Tesla and its rebate claims is just one example of the broader unease that many Canadians feel about foreign companies exerting influence over the country's markets and policy decisions. While Alberta's government is focused on advocating for more freedom in its economic decisions, other provinces are pushing back against what they perceive as overreach by foreign corporations. In this context, Smith's leadership and her ability to balance Alberta's economic interests with the broader concerns of Canadian citizens will be put to the test. Moreover, Smith's actions come at a time when Canada is facing growing pressure on multiple fronts. The Trump administration's tariffs on Canadian goods have added strain to an already complex economic landscape, particularly for Alberta's energy sector. The province's reliance on fossil fuels and its struggle to diversify its economy in the face of global climate change. Concerns make Alberta especially vulnerable to shifts in U.S. policy. Smith's decision to engage with figures who are seen as sympathetic to the Trump administration is viewed by some as an attempt to shore up Alberta's energy interests against what she perceives as external threats. Whether this strategy will prove successful or lead to further polarization remains to be seen. The growing division within Canada on issues like climate change, foreign trade, and resource development underscores the complexities that provincial leaders like Smith must navigate. On one hand, there is pressure to protect Alberta's economic interests and ensure that the province's resource development is not hindered by national or international policy shifts. On the other hand, there is the need to uphold the values that define Canada, which include a commitment to environmental sustainability, social equity, and international cooperation. Smith's engagement with figures like Shapiro has the potential to either strengthen Alberta's position or isolate the province from broader Canadian values. The next few months will reveal whether Smith can manage the delicate balance between representing Alberta's economic interests and maintaining the support of her constituents. As her leadership is scrutinized both within Alberta and across Canada, her ability to unite the province while navigating complex international relationships will determine whether her approach ultimately succeeds or fails. As Premier Danielle Smith's political strategy unfolds, the broader impact of her decisions on Alberta's future remains a subject of intense scrutiny. The complexities of international trade, foreign influence, and domestic economic priorities are all at play, as Alberta seeks to assert its position in a rapidly changing global environment. Smith's engagement with controversial American figures like Ben Shapiro is not just a matter of political spectacle. It is part of a larger effort to reshape Alberta's economic narrative. The question now is whether this approach will help the province thrive or whether it will backfire, alienating key allies and leaving Alberta isolated. Smith's supporters argue that her stance is a necessary response to the pressures facing Alberta's economy, particularly within the energy sector. The province's heavy reliance on oil and gas has been a contentious issue for years, especially with the global shift toward renewable energy. Alberta's economic future depends on its ability to diversify, but this process is slow and fraught with challenges. In this context, Smith's outreach to conservative U.S. figures who support fossil fuel industries is seen as a strategic move to secure more favorable trade relations with the U.S. These relationships, Smith argues, could help protect Alberta's economic interests in the face of shifting global trends and political pressure. However, this approach has its drawbacks. Critics argue that Smith's decision to align herself with figures like Shapiro could harm Alberta's reputation on the international stage, particularly among Canadians who prioritize inclusivity and diversity. As Smith continues to engage with these figures, she faces growing backlash not only from opposition parties, but also from within her own province. Many Albertans are uncomfortable with the optics of their leader, associating with figures who have been accused of promoting divisive and harmful rhetoric. This tension is compounded by the fact that Smith's strategy of aligning Alberta's economic future with figures associated with controversial viewpoints could alienate both domestic and international allies who value diplomacy and mutual respect. The backlash against Smith's political maneuvering also highlights the growing divide within Canadian politics regarding the role of foreign corporations and trade relationships. As Tesla's rebate controversy shows, Canada is becoming increasingly wary of foreign influence in its domestic policies. Tesla, with its connections to the U.S. government, is just one example of how foreign companies can impact Canadian markets and policy decisions. While Alberta's government continues to push for more economic freedom, other provinces are taking a more cautious approach. Provinces like Nova Scotia and Manitoba have moved to protect their own rebate programs from foreign influence, signaling a shift toward more protectionist policies at the provincial level. The question is whether this shift will be sustainable, or if it will create further divisions between provinces that are more open to foreign investment and those that are more focused on safeguarding domestic industries. For Smith, the challenge lies in balancing Alberta's economic interests with the broader responsibilities of leadership in a multicultural and inclusive country like Canada. While Alberta's economy may benefit from closer ties with the U.S. and its conservative leaders, Smith must also consider the long-term implications of her political strategy. Engaging with controversial figures may bring short-term economic gains, but it could also create lasting divisions that harm Alberta's standing within Canada. And on the global stage, Smith's handling of the Tesla rebate situation, her engagement with U.S. political figures, and her broader trade strategy will define her political legacy. The province's economic future will depend on her ability to unite Albertans while maintaining respect for the values that define Canada as a nation. How Smith navigates these complex issues will determine whether Alberta remains a leader in Canada's economic development, or whether it risks alienating itself from the rest of the country. As the public debate continues to unfold, It is clear that Smith's leadership will be put to the test. Can she balance Alberta's need for economic growth with the broader Canadian values of inclusion, respect, and environmental sustainability? Or will her political maneuvering alienate the very people she is seeking to represent? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain: the outcome of this political struggle will have long-lasting implications for both Alberta and Canada as a whole. As Premier Danielle Smith's actions continue to spark political debate, the ripple effects of her leadership strategy are being felt across Alberta and Canada. The growing discontent surrounding her engagement with controversial figures in the U.S. is a reflection of a deeper national conversation about leadership, foreign influence, and the responsibilities of provincial leaders. While Smith's supporters defend her approach, arguing that it is necessary to protect Alberta's economic interests, critics continue to question whether aligning with figures known for their divisive rhetoric will ultimately benefit the province in the long run. For Alberta, which has long been reliant on its energy sector, the stakes are high. Smith's strategy of building stronger ties with conservative U.S. figures, who are seen as supporters of fossil fuel industries, is viewed by many as an attempt to secure favorable trade relations and economic opportunities for the province. With Alberta's oil and gas industry facing global pressure due to the shift toward renewable energy, Smith's outreach to American political figures is framed as a strategic response to the challenges the province is experiencing. However, her critics argue that this strategy could isolate Alberta from the broader Canadian political landscape, particularly when it comes to climate change and environmental policies. The backlash against Smith's strategy is not limited to the political opposition, but also comes from within her own province. Many Albertans are uncomfortable with the optics of their premier, associating with individuals whose views are seen as offensive or contrary to Canadian values. As Smith continues to build relationships with controversial American figures, the concern is that this could further polarize Alberta's political landscape and alienate Canadians, who value inclusivity, equality, and respect for all people. By engaging with figures like Ben Shapiro, Smith risks framing Alberta as a province that prioritizes economic interests over the values that have long been seen as foundational to Canada's national identity. The controversy surrounding Smith's leadership also reflects the broader, ongoing debate in Canada about the role of foreign corporations in international trade. The Tesla rebate controversy, for example, underscores the increasing concerns among Canadians about foreign influence in domestic policy decisions. Tesla's ties to the U.S. government and its attempt to flood the Canadian rebate system with last-minute claims raised alarms about the company's ability to manipulate Canadian policies to its advantage. While Alberta continues to push for more autonomy in trade and economic decisions, other provinces, like Nova Scotia and Manitoba, have taken a more cautious approach, pushing back against foreign influence in their markets. These provincial moves signal a shift toward a more protectionist stance that could alter the trajectory of Canadian trade policies in the coming years. For Smith, navigating the complexities of Alberta's economic future while maintaining the trust of her constituents will require a delicate balance. As her outreach to U.S. political figures intensifies, the question remains whether her strategy will successfully protect Alberta's interests, or if it will result in further alienation both within Canada and on the international stage. The province's reliance on the oil and gas sector has long been a contentious issue in Canadian politics, especially as the global conversation around climate change grows louder. Smith's decision to prioritize resource development, while engaging with conservative U.S. figures, may provide short-term economic benefits, but it risks deepening divisions between Alberta and other provinces, particularly those in Canada that prioritize climate action. The key to Smith's success will be her ability to convince Albertans and the broader Canadian public that her leadership is not about abandoning Canadian values, but about securing Alberta's economic future in a rapidly changing world. Her challenge is to show that her engagement with American figures does not equate to a surrender of Canadian principles, but rather a strategic maneuver to ensure that Alberta remains competitive in a global economy. However, as the political climate continues to shift, Smith will need to address concerns about Alberta's reputation and ensure that her actions do not alienate Canadians who believe in a more inclusive, forward-thinking vision for the country's future. As the debate continues to unfold, the direction Smith chooses to take will have profound implications for her political future. Will she be able to unite Albertans behind her vision of economic growth and resource development? Or will her controversial alliances with U.S. figures alienate the very people she seeks to represent? Only time will tell. But what is certain is that Smith's actions will continue to shape the future of Alberta's political landscape for years to come. As Premier Danielle Smith's leadership continues to unfold in Alberta, the political discourse surrounding her approach to foreign relations and trade has reached a fever pitch. The consequences of her decision to engage with controversial figures like Ben Shapiro and align Alberta's economic future with pro-business, conservative figures in the U.S. have stirred not only provincial but national debates. Her strategic decisions are raising difficult questions about the role of provincial leaders in the broader Canadian political context, especially when it comes to reconciling economic goals with the core values that Canadians hold dear. Smith's detractors argue that aligning with figures like Shapiro, who is known for his polarizing views, risks alienating the very people she is supposed to represent. Many believe that her approach to international relations could turn Alberta into a political outlier within Canada, further deepening the divide between provinces. Critics warn that by embracing controversial U.S. figures who represent extreme viewpoints, Smith risks losing the support of moderate voters and progressive Canadians, who prioritize inclusivity and equality. These voters, many of whom are from other provinces, might view her actions as a betrayal of the Canadian identity, which has long been defined by its emphasis on diversity and respect for human rights. However, Smith's supporters maintain that her strategy is a necessary response to the political and economic pressures Alberta faces, with the province heavily reliant on its oil and gas industry, which is under growing global scrutiny due to the climate crisis. Smith sees an opportunity to secure more favorable economic deals with conservative U.S. policymakers, who are more inclined to support fossil fuel industries. By engaging with these figures, Smith hopes to ensure that Alberta's economic priorities, especially its energy sector, are given the attention they deserve on the global stage. In doing so, Smith aims to strengthen Alberta's standing in international trade, negotiations, and protect its economic interests. The crux of Smith's leadership challenge lies in balancing Alberta's economic needs with the broader expectations of Canadians. While Smith's focus on economic growth and job creation resonates with many Albertans, her association with controversial figures complicates her position. As Alberta's economic future is tied to resource development, particularly fossil fuels, Smith faces the ongoing dilemma of managing Alberta's interests in the face of increasing global pressure to transition to renewable energy. Her government's actions will undoubtedly influence the political landscape not only in Alberta, but across Canada as the nation grapples with the question of how to balance economic growth with environmental sustainability. Smith's support for the oil and gas sector, combined with her outreach to conservative U.S. figures, positions her at the center of a broader political debate about the future of Canadian energy policy, the challenges posed by climate change, and the global shift toward clean energy put Alberta in a precarious position. On the one hand, Alberta's economy relies heavily on its energy exports, particularly oil and gas. On the other hand, the rest of Canada, particularly provinces like British Columbia and Quebec, has increasingly prioritized environmental concerns and the transition to green energy. Smith's strategy may help Alberta maintain its position as a major player in the energy market, but it risks further alienating the rest of the country and creating a wider rift between Alberta and the federal government. As Smith continues to navigate this political minefield, her leadership will be tested in the coming months. The political landscape in Alberta and Canada as a whole is shifting, and Smith's ability to unite her province while balancing economic priorities with national values will be critical. The road ahead is fraught with challenges, but it also presents opportunities for Smith to redefine Alberta's role in Canada's future. If she can successfully navigate the complexities of international trade and foreign relations, while staying true to the values that define Canada, Smith could emerge as a key figure in the ongoing evolution of Canadian politics. The future of Alberta's political landscape depends on how well Smith can engage with both domestic and international stakeholders. Her ability to maintain a strong economic position for the province, while fostering unity among Canadians, will be essential. Whether her strategy proves successful or ends up alienating key groups remains to be seen. But it is clear that the stakes for Alberta and for Canada as a whole are high.